We are on the morning break in the questioning of Atif Choudhury at the undercover policing inquiry. Atif Choudhury was he doesn't like the term founding member, he doesn't like the term activist, but he's a founding activist in the London International Solidarity Movement, someone who was really involved in setting up the Fair Trade Palestinian olive dates, all sorts of things, organizations. Zatoon. Yeah. I'm joined by Asa Winstanley, who's a friend of Atif's, and worked with him in the past. What have you made of his questioning so far this morning?
Well, it's a much lighter day today, thank God, than yesterday. I don't know. Look, I mean, I think I mentioned yesterday, not very eloquently, that I've sort of got two hats on here. I'm here as Atif's friend. I'm here as a former activist in ISM, and I'm also here as a journalist. So that's three hats. So yeah, I don't know. My overall impression of so far this morning is just I'm really proud to be associated with Atif because he's brilliant. He's very eloquent. He's very generous. He's very giving. He's very and he's just like explaining that time very well. You know, that sort of time, mid-2000s, Iraq War, all of that, and he's invoking it very well, and it's incredibly clear of how Rob targeted both him and Maya. You know?
Yeah, very much. I mean, he's there's been a lot of restriction orders this morning, so that means that the feed has been suspended multiple times. So I know people will have missed a lot of it, and there's a lot of things we can't say that's purely down to privacy. So obviously, I have no intention of breaking any of it. What we can say is that he's really evoked the way in which the friendship that Rob Harrison kind of developed with him was very intense. They got very close.
2 to 3 times a week he came around.
Yeah. Unannounced. Yeah, that they talked very deeply about things. He said, he essentially said, that's kind of as close as any man got to him in life. He talks about the relationship that Rob Harrison had with Maya. He talks about at first he's very supportive of it, how he ended up being quite worried about it because Maya was telling him things, he was putting them to Rob Harrison, and Harrison was going, no, she's making that up. And he was like, he knew Maya well enough to know that wasn't going to be the case. And it was like he said, there was lots of things that he said that at the time he thought were kind of supportive and like quite whatever, but then in retrospect was like, now we know what we know now, were like actually quite disturbing. I mean, he also talked about the fact that, I mean, like, though he's kind of, we've seen the reports where he's referred to as a leading light in the ISM. He's like, look, once I'd kind of been doing this bit of training, once I'd been over to Palestine a few times, really kind of realized the limitations of bearing witness. I was concentrating on other things. It was a tune that I was putting my time and energy into, doing some fundraisers, stuff like that. Wasn't actually involved in an activist sense. And it appears that Rob Harrison was kind of going to these meetings and then going back to Atif's house. But the reports, because that was the brown guy, he was focusing on him, and he really kind of drew out the way in which the racial profiling.
Absolutely, and Atif made that point very clear that he, Rob Hastings, the police spy, very much told this racist narrative in reports about him that we now know about, and that is fascinating because, absolutely, Atif's recollection very much chimes with mine. Because I first got involved in ISM London at the end of 2003, and 2004. So I was just going in at the time that Atif had just left, really. But from my point of view, when I went in, I would just hear a lot about Atif from other friends and activists. I mean, he mentioned Charlotte Carson. So that was my experience of Atif, and then we met later as friends, and actually we met out in Palestine because he was on, at that time, later trips for Zaytoon, but he was not involved, Atif, at that time in any of those meetings that I was, that Rob was, Charlotte, and many others. Not many, the kind of regular activist meetings to organise our agenda in London. It was never more than a dozen people. Trainings, other meetings that Atif described would be more. But Rob was at most of those for a period, but Atif was at, I don't remember Atif at that time, 2004 to 2007, being at that time that I was involved in ISM, and Atif was not single one of those meetings. So it's very striking how Rob was coming back from those kind of meetings and then go and just hang out at Atif's place. What is that about?
Yeah, we've had a bunch of questions that we always get whenever any civilian is questioned at the inquiry about their opinions towards violence. I would say fair enough to Sarah Selway, instead of like spacing them out as we sometimes see, she just did the 3 in a row. She got them out of the way just before we went to the break, and I think that Atif did a really good job of like contrasting the very extreme violence that we see in Palestine, in Iraq. But you know, earlier on he'd been talking about the murder of Rachel Corrie, the murder of Tom Herndl. Sorry, please say that. Tom Herndl. Yeah. That like you know that the ISM, nothing that he was ever involved in, ever advocated for violence in any way. It is particularly offensive when activists are asked about violence. I think people from my movement maybe kind of understand a bit more, but when you're kind of talking to these to peace activists like Atif, you know, people who've like absolutely dedicated their lives to struggle against violence and war, it's particularly offensive.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, this is a really good point, and there is kind of a racial way in which Atif was targeted, and he's not a religious guy, but he's at the same time he's proud of where he comes from. He's proud of his family, proud of his background, and you know, as the sort of brown Muslim heritage man in the group, it's very striking that he was targeted that way, absolutely. And yeah, you know, Atif's recollection of that time is absolutely correct, that ISM London was almost entirely white. There was I remember one other Asian person in ISM London later, several years later, after Atif's time. But it was mostly white. And so, yeah, you know, he was definitely targeted in that way. And it will be really interesting to see if Rob Hastings has got any justification for that next week.
Yeah, I mean, once again, we're getting a whole bunch of stuff that we hope to, we assume will get put to Robert Hastings when he appears next week, when he is questioned between Tuesday and Thursday next week. Just, you know, why on earth are you concentrating on this person who was not involved in? I mean, we saw some of his reports where he talks about Atif having 2 linked laptops in his bedroom that ran ISM London, and like Atif was like, I haven't even got 1 laptop at the time. I wasn't really involved in ISM London. I mean, like, it's not just that it's factually incorrect. It's just like it's total nonsense.
Yeah. Very clear. It's very clear that he was making up stuff, for sure.
And I think this is something that we see from so many of the undercover officers, where when there is a lack of information, then you just make things up. Now, in a lot of cases, you know, we've heard from a lot of undercover officers who kind of basically centered themselves in the middle of like the social scene. They turned up at pubs and at benefit gigs and social gatherings of activists, and just like reported any random pub talk that they heard when people were 6 or 7 pints deep. What it seems with Robert Hastings, what he was doing was he was going around Atif's house afterwards and like, you know, transposing information that the ideas that he might have picked up somewhere else into Atif because he was a brown person. And yeah, I mean, none of it. None of the reporting we've seen so far, and I mean, I hope we'll see a lot more yet. I think things are restarting. We just had the knock. Thanks for joining us. We'll better return to the hearing. We'll be back in at lunchtime doing more of an update. Please join us then.